going to remind you, Graham, for your little chant there at the start of the show, that treat all microphones as live.
I'm always reminding myself that I need to mind my P's and Q's. You know me. Doesn't hurt.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Mantras.
Welcome back to the 2025 season of AutoTalk, with the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. It's episode 113. Now, you're probably wondering, those keen watchers of the show, where is episode 112? Well, there was actually two episode 110s, or 110s, and then an episode 111, so I figured we better skip 112 and go straight to 113. That makes sense?
You're probably the only person that even knew that, Richard, let alone noticed. But hey, good for us. Let's go straight through to 113.
You would be amazed at what people notice in the comments section. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, that's true, actually. Anyway, look, Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome back to the industry.
Yes, the comment section is an interesting one. Obviously, dealers aren't the most involved bunch at times when it comes to discourse publicly. Maybe over a few beers at a bar, they definitely are. And so, none of the trade titles in New Zealand get a massive amount of to and fro in their comment sections. But we, of course, now own Autocar, and the public, oh by golly, particularly when you get an electric car story, especially one with a remote slice of controversy to it, the comments section just goes crazy. And my phone last night was just, have one story, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots. It was getting kind of crazy, and it does that occasionally. But anyway, go over to autocar.co.nz or Autocar on Facebook and watch the debate.
I was going to say, good, healthy debate, Richard. There's nothing wrong with it.
Exactly. So you work through, Graham?
Yes. Yep, everything but the stats.
And David, you don't work, so...
No, apart from replacing old gates at the back gate and a bit of painting here or there and some gardening.
Did you get your caravan out?
No, this is an ongoing saga with a new build. It's 3.5 years that every time I take the front road cover off, the front window leaks. So it's going back to an RV caravan dealer for it to be looked at next week. I did manage, after a lot of toing and froing, to catch the eye and ear of the manufacturer's representative when I sent an email and said it was titled "Just for the Record," showing lots of water inside the caravan. He was on holiday and he came back and said, "Oh yes, this is a bit worrying. We're going to have to look at that."
Is it a newer caravan? It's not one of these old C.I. Munro jobbies from 1974 that I saw so many of on the road this summer? The old retro caravan market is alive and well. So you've got a newbie.
Pulled out and done up.
Yeah,
it's 3.5 years old and it's a New Zealand build. Slightly more expensive. We bought it supposedly because of its good build quality. But it was one of the ones that came out during the COVID rush from people buying caravans, and I think they sort of upped the speed at which they built them. Careful what I say here, but it appears that the front window was never sealed properly. So we'll see. And just those retro caravans, Graham, they've become the in thing. People buy them, whip the under chassis off, put a new under chassis on, put the new rubber seals around the windows, and away they go.
My mother has one called Betty that when she first got it, they were messing around with all sorts of stuff like that, and I said, right, just rip the bed out and put it, because the old one, they had those horrible kind of bunks, and they had bunks with the center thing where they had folding
divans,
2 levels and all that.
Divans.
Yeah, and it's expensive because the mattresses are either crappy foam ones or you got to pay for a custom sized mattress or whatever. So I said, just went down to Bunnings, I mapped something out, got them to cut it down at Bunnings, ripped a front off the existing beds, pulled it down 0.5 meter to measure it out exactly, and sealed it back up, put a basic frame underneath, full size house, queen size mattress in it. Massive improvement. Sure, you lose some floor space, but isn't it for sleeping?
They are basically, you sleep, and in our one, it's only 5.8 meters, so it's not a long one, single axle. So it's to sleep, and cook and eat, then you are out doing things. You're walking, you're visiting, sightseeing, that sort of stuff. It's just a comfortable bedroom on wheels away from home.
Yeah, I do always get concerned these days. Well, and Graham, you're probably with me on this. Is that I look at caravans, or I mean, look, I've rented caravans, rented motorhomes. I've enjoyed that time with them. They're okay. Look at the price of them, and I go, that is an awful lot of nights at a nice Novotel.
Yeah. I mean, for the same sort of price, I could go somewhere and not poo in a bucket, which I always think is a distinct advantage. And I grew up with a caravanning family history. We didn't own a caravan, but every year we'd rent a caravan and we'd trundle off down to the East Coast, East Cape sort of area, and we'd spend, the Kiwi summer, plunk down for a week, fresh seafood. Dad would burn everything on the barbecue. Trundle off with the toothbrush kit, poo in the bucket, come back to the caravan, sleep at night. Great, really, really cool. But I'm of an age now where I do, like you, Richard, I like the idea of going somewhere with a big sign that says everything here that you could possibly want away from home and more for a very nominal sum, because caravanning is no longer cheap.
I look at the price of, your average kind of motorhome these days is what, 150 grand for a new one. That's
and the rest.
And the rest.
Yeah,
okay, starting point. I'm trying to be nice here, and I'm counting the fact you still got to drive somewhere. Mm-hmm. That's 750 nights at a Novotel with breakfast.
That sounds amazing.
So we went through all of this when we bought our caravan, and look, it wasn't cheap. It was $87,000. It was cheaper at the time than building a spare room, and it has been used as a spare room and a guest room a lot. So for us, if we couldn't justify buying it just as a caravan because of those sums. But even caravanning is getting more expensive because you tow it around, you then park it up. If you do belong to the New Zealand Motorhome Association, they do have a lot of sleep over and park over nights that are for self-contained units only, which are cheap. But yeah, it's.
You got, I know when we were motorhoming, the average price we paid for a powered site for 2 adults and a child on our trip. And okay, we stayed at top tens and some other stuff as well, but it was $60 to $70, and that wasn't peak season. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've got a good friend. He spends 3 months a year out caravanning and does do a lot of the Freedom and MCA campsites. So then you can make the sums work. But yeah, buying a flash motorhome, you're looking at it for a really decent motorhome versus a caravan. You're looking at about 200,000 plus. Mm-hmm. And caravan prices are getting up to 150 to 200,000. They've just, I don't know how people can justify spending that money.
Yeah. The I mean, in Australia, obviously, it's a massive thing, the whole grey nomads thing, but they've got a little more territory to cover than we do. You can get a little bit away from a Novotel over there, whereas you're not really that far from a Novotel in New Zealand. Thing I did over the summer, of course, was we mentioned this in the previous podcast, but David, you went around, was I took a Ford e-Transit and took the barrier out so that the rear is air conditioned, which was a mission, but we got there. And then put a full house-size king mattress in the back, which fitted perfectly. And I bought a little fridge to go in there and a couple of boxes of food and took the kettle because you've got Pro power on board, so you got 2.4 kilowatts of a 240 volt to use anytime you want. Sleep with the air conditioning on, and we camped in that. Perfect setup. Now, we lasted for all of 2 nights because my daughter decided that she wanted to share a beer with us and kick the crap out of us, and I really don't like not sleeping. But yes, it was interesting. And for those EV people going, well, that vehicle doesn't go very far. It on the open road did over 200 kilometers, which is about, in New Zealand summer conditions, 3 to 4 hours of driving. And it was more than enough. Anyway.
That's very going to the festival with your mates type camping, as opposed to family at the beach type camping. But I get your point, Rich.
I think it would have been, at the beach, it would have been a definite upgrade from a tent.
Should I choose your cardigan now with a cheese cutter hat? Should I send it your way?
As I said, We lasted 2 nights and then skipped to an Airbnb. So let's not get
Yes, exactly. Off to the Novotel.
that's no fault of the no. Well, we stayed at the Novotel on the way down to our camping.
I can see David shaking his head. Perhaps we should move on.
Anyway, we have some news. It's actually been a pretty busy first week of the year. First business week of the year. Though I have to say, I can't really think you'll be watching because calling around this week, there's not a lot of people probably back at work outside of the retail end of the trade. I say that, and someone likes our post. Good morning, Ra. Now let's go on to the news, and we'll start off with a quick run through of the stats. And we're in the middle of just working out what's what on stats at the moment because there were some slight issues with some of the initial numbers, but they give the sense, and we'll get to the MAA ones, which I'd say are fairly rock solid. But the initial figures, there were some commercials and some passengers and blah blah blah. Someone who was doing them probably had a few too many eggnogs. Ford Ranger was the top vehicle for 2024. New Zealand new car market experienced a year of significant contrast in 2024. While the commercial vehicle segment saw steady growth, the passenger market faced challenges reflecting broader economic pressures and changing consumer preferences. And of course, CCD kicking the crap out of everything still.
Ranger number one, no surprise. Really?
Yes. Well, look, there were some outlets near the end of the year suggesting that the Toyota RAV4 could overhaul the Ranger for the win, and it was never going to. And anyone who wrote that really was just trying to make trouble. So total new vehicles registered during 2024. This is the NZTA provisional figures. We'll get to the solid ones in a second. 128,776, down 14.2%. Passenger cars, 87,392, down at 20.8%. Commercial sector, 41,384, a 7.4% year-on-year increase. But keep in mind with that number that the year before that was a CCD year. People over at the year before loaded up on vehicles, and at the end of the year they stopped buying vehicles. So December before last, December 23, was pretty much no one was driving ute out of a dealership if they could avoid it. Because you would have to pay a fee. So that number, it's still hard work out there. Ford Ranger stood as New Zealand's best-selling vehicle, beating the Toyota RAV4 by 1,200 units. Ford also clinched the title for best-selling commercial marque. RAV4 was obviously top-selling passenger vehicle. So top brands, passenger vehicles, Toyota, Mitsubishi, Kia, Suzuki, Ford, commercial vehicles, Ford, Toyota, Mitsubishi, Isuzu, Nissan. Interestingly, the Mitsubishi figure with all the Triton stuff they've done, up 35% for the year. So that was pretty reasonable. Top overall, Ford Ranger, Toyota RAV4, Toyota Hilux, Mitsubishi Triton, Nissan Navara. That's right.
You got it.
Yep. Passenger cars, RAV4, Mitsubishi ASX, Outlander, Kia Seltos, Suzuki Swift, and commercials, Ford, Toyota, Mitsubishi, Toyota. Yeah. Anyway, busy year there. On to used. Aqua still the lead. Total of 97,819 vehicles, a 14.8% decline, which I think is nowhere near as bad as it felt like during the year.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that better myself. It felt like the year was worse, and I look at the numbers and I think, well, okay, where did those cars go? Because it certainly felt a lot less than that. Although, if we look at the monthly dips and flows in the marketplace, I suspect we had a much better start of the year. The first half of 24 was a lot stronger than the second half of 24. If we'd had the second half of the year performance all the way through, it could have been a bit of a different story. And we saw that in the numbers. So the overall 24 statistic was bolstered by a reasonable first half of the year. Sinead isn't.
10% of import passenger cars was Toyota Aquas, though that is on the decline, as we all know. Toyota led the marques with 36.8% market share. Commercials were up by 1.4%, but it's 6,100 units. It's not exactly a giant market there anymore. Hiace was the top performer, 2,292. and Twitter was the top brand. Acura and Highest, the top models. Yeah, so interesting when they were fused, but yeah, not as bad as I think you would have thought.
Except if you look at 2 years, and I'm looking at the MIA registration table that Amy has posted to the website. If you look at 2 years, the new vehicle market has dropped 22%. So it's a continued decline year on year for 2 years. And I suspect the used vehicle market is probably about the same. And the perversity around the numbers, Richard, for government interventions, and we all know that government interventions affect the market. So the market, when we say let the market rule, the market only ever rules within the regulatory setting that governments in each country have. The single highest month ever for new vehicle sales was in June 2023, and that was 20,560 new vehicles. And for the same month, June 2024, it dropped from 23,500 to 9,400. So these are the sort of markers where you get some very lumpy months because of interventions. I think if the government keeps its nose out of the market, which is, well, if the government doesn't make any more substantial changes and things carry on, we will get the market resetting under the new regulatory things. The other big stat, I think, Richard, I saw it in your other brand, AutoTalk, is the I saw it in one of the papers, 74% reduction in EVs in last year compared to the year before. So that does make a big difference. So that's when you see the likes of BYD and Tesla dropping out of the top 15 because they're no longer selling in big numbers.
Yeah.
I think that will change coming into 2025. I think we'll see the numbers start to go up again. And Amy has put out a press release noting that when she put out the December numbers, she said in the press release, 2025 is going to be interesting because the CO2 targets continue to bite. So the changes that the national government made to the targets, it really takes effect in 26 and 27. They didn't change the 25 ones very much. I think other than maybe they tweaked the commercial ones. I'd have to go back and have a look.
They really lifted the throat off the utes. That's the only thing they really did, was they basically opened a giant window for utes.
Yeah. So the passenger car targets bite a little bit more again. And so the consumer preference and consumer demand is out of step with the CO2 targets. So it's going to be an interesting year.
I think that sentiment, David, is exactly the same for used. And I'm not quite sure if this is the segment, Richard, talking about. I mean, there's a lot of discussion right now about CCS and what that means for the respective new and used. But I know within used, there's a lot of chatter going on already that people are starting to wake up to the change in CCS value at import for our sector, for the used sector. And I think a lot of dealers have been remiss or maybe asleep or just didn't realise what the change of targets on effectively the 1st of January has meant for our industry in terms of what we import. And I think, David, you just hit the nail on the head there, that irrespective of your mantra, your belief in what's right or wrong in terms of our system and our regulation, current regulations appear to be out of step with consumer demand. I don't think I could have put that better myself. So I look out on what we're importing at the moment as an industry. Part of what we import is because we can, and part of it's because it's what people want. And invariably, if it's what we can get, it ends up being what they want. And if they want it, we'll get it if we can get it. There's two different variables at play there. At the moment, the difficulty is what people want is what we can't necessarily access, or is going to be more expensive to access. Quite a lot more expensive, actually, when you start factoring in CCS. And I haven't seen change. In fact, if anything, I've seen a growth in the numbers of vehicles coming in up to the end of last year that I'd argue and say are out of step now with the regulation going forward. That's going to create some real problems for our sector. And it all just comes down to where that charge point ends up, and it's going to have to be absorbed by consumers. And so there's going to be pricing shifts this year, not because anyone wants to. but because the industry has to, because it just can't keep eating the CCS or charges or debits, as it were, that it's going to have to face. And there's not alternatives. It's not like the industry can find lots of cleaner cars to support the argument because the public don't want them, or they're just not available anywhere near the pricing points that we can access them. It's going to be a really difficult year, I think, that a lot of dealers have not yet faced up to or realize what it's going to mean in terms of their actual cost per unit.
Yeah,
I guess
I
there's
agree.
two sides to that. I mean, one element is that the point? I mean, is that the system working? Is it trying to shape what we're buying and what we're putting through the system? And two, we had some complaints from some side groups when we had those changes to the clean car standard that the minister had only spoken to a very small number of organisations, and I didn't disagree with the minister doing that. But have we not seen enough change because it was so quick and because it was done on the hop and with the guidance of a couple of particularly loud voices? I mean, if we look at what we just talked about out there, the only changes really to the CCS for this year was a giant door was opened for utes. So who was suggesting that to the minister?
Well, the minister had, to be fair, Richard, the minister had already made up his mind before the election that he was going to do that. I know because I was still in the hot seat and having a discussion with him about it.
I totally agree, but then we get into the nuance of what the changes actually are.
Yeah, well, but it was a political decision. Let's just park that one there. But coming back to what Amy noted and picking up on your point, Graham, prices will adjust because it has to be passed on. And Amy made the comment about that being out of step with consumer demand harks back to a line that I was very strong on when Julianne Genter was in the seat. So this is going back quite a few years. And I kept saying to her, even though new vehicles, our forward planning and forward ordering is 6 months to 8 months, 9 months to get a vehicle from factory to New Zealand, and 3 to 5 years in the planning. The long-term market trends is you think of vehicles as being put on supermarket shelves, and if this shelf clears and that shelf doesn't, then you order more of the ones that clear because that's definitely what the consumers want. In the used vehicle market, you have the flexibility of doing that more quickly, subject, of course, to the availability of vehicles to meet the regulatory demands. And that's, I guess, is what the government's responding to. And I think Simeon Brown also said you got to match the regulatory functions and targets to the technological ability to do so. Otherwise, you pass a cost onto the consumers that is inevitable. So the technology is not quite there en masse for utes. It's coming, but it is increasingly en masse for passenger vehicles. So you're able to do that. But here's the thing, even though people start talking about price parity, I know, Richard, you believe we're almost there. We're not by any stretch of the imagination. So electric vehicles, fully electric vehicles, you still have to pay a premium over non-electric vehicles. And so as you move to electric vehicles, the price goes up. The margin is decreasing, and we'd like to see that decrease more. It's nothing more than I'd like to see is price parity, but we're not there yet. So 2025 will be the challenging year, and I think it's going to be a year of reckoning as things start to even out. If the economy starts to improve as we expect it will, then I guess the affordability of electric vehicles will improve. And that's the ability. When people feel they have the ability to pay for them, then that will come.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Right, let's move on to a story that I'm going to caution Graham. We stay calm on. Car dealer wins defamation case over Facebook comments. A High Court judge has ordered $20,000 in damages for an Auckland car dealer in a defamation case involving Facebook comments falsely alleging he had stolen a vehicle. The case, heard in October 2024, stemmed from a dispute over the sale of a 2009 Toyota Yaris. The plaintiff, John Murphy, a car dealer trading as Kumwa Motor Co., claimed his reputation was seriously damaged by posts on Facebook made by Jinjin Kai, also known as Jasmine Kai. The court found the posts alleged that Murphy had illegally taken possession of the vehicle, which amounted to theft, according to a recently released judgment. The dispute began in May 2023 when Kai's partner sold the car to Murphy's dealership. Despite the sale, Kai claimed she had not consented to it and reported the vehicle as stolen to the police. Later that day, 2 Facebook comments were posted under the name Jasmine Kai, accusing Murphy of illegal possession and theft. In court, Murphy argued that the comments were defamatory and sought $200,000 in damages, claiming the allegations were especially harmful to his reputation as a car dealer. Justice Anderson agreed that the posts were defamatory. In my view, someone casually reading the Facebook posts would indeed take from the post that Mr. Murphy had stolen the car. The court rejected Kai's defense of the comments, represented her honest opinion, or they merely reflected a dispute over ownership. A defamatory statement is one that tends to lower the plaintiff in the estimation of reasonable people, the judge noted, adding that the false allegations of theft were particularly damaging to Murphy's professional reputation. Right. Does this set a bit of a precedent that if someone's out there saying nasty things about you on Facebook that aren't necessarily true, but now you can have a crack at them at court in regards to a car dealership?
You probably expected me to chime in and say, oh, you know, this, and I don't know what you expected me to say, Richard. But I'm actually going to go back and say that I actually agree in this case with John Murphy's take on it. Now, this is irrespective. I don't know the specific details of why there was concern around this particular transaction. I don't know. So I'm not really interested in that side of it. For the purpose of this argument, is you actually can't go around saying things like, you stole my car, if the car was not stolen. And one of the great issues that I have these days with social media, and I know I sound like an old guy saying that, but we can all nod our heads and say that you can say whatever you like, it seems these days in the online space, as a method to either complete lies, or for that matter, as a method to bully somebody into the action that you believe they should undertake, by populating social media with untruths, because no one's going to call you on it, and it becomes effectively it's online bullying in reverse. Consumers already have a lot of power through the Consumer Guarantees Act, through the Fair Trading Act, through all the other mechanisms that give consumers a degree of power if they choose to utilize it. And ironically, the trade, I think, has never been in a worse position to defend itself against attacks if they're not proven or not correct. And in this case, if the vehicle was not genuinely stolen and somebody has been saying that it is, and they've pointed it to the particular individual as case is concerned, that is wrong. I don't care who it is. That is wrong. And it's about time people started calling out for just shitty behavior online and Facebook and TikToks and bits and pieces that are not true. But you can't defend yourself. Maybe it's about time.
I don't think this is a precedent, Richard. It's always been the case that if you make comments that are in a public forum that then pull down the reputation of another person, and those comments are unreasonable, not based in fact, that you can be taken to court over it. What I think is happening is we're starting to see people prepared to do that from comments on Facebook. Facebook is a very public place. So I'm glad that this has been taken to court. I'm glad that a decision has been made. But I don't hold out much hope that people will change that keyboard warrior. Let's hit the keyboard first. It's kind of like in the workplace. I know as a manager, I had to continually caution staff that I was responsible for about sending emails when they were complaining about the behaviors of other people. So, you got to think before you speak. You got to think before you write. So these social media bullying platforms, I hope to see more court cases where reputations are somewhat repaired through the legal process. It's sad, but I think it's necessary.
Of course, that's if you can afford to take these things. Things are very expensive. Mr. Murphy has a history of representing himself. I believe in this case he was representing himself with a Mackenzie friend, which is a... I'm not sure if the technical term is a layperson, but someone who is there to assist you and not necessarily the terms of a lawyer. Of course, representing yourself is dangerous. Some of the bigger dealers potentially could afford a lawyer, but I think very rarely do these cases actually pay out. So it is a bit of a unique situation. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting one. Certainly an interesting one.
Yeah.
I would like to note, Graham, your comments about young people. There's no young people on Facebook.
Well, actually, that's a actually, it's a good point. There probably isn't. Just thinking about it. But I think a lot of that, it is still a platform utilized by many people, including our customers, en masse, perhaps not 15-year-olds buying motor cars, but the power of the wider social media now, the ability to spread the message across a wider platform, is something a little bit new to some of us that started out of the industry when it was just a letter to the editor in the paper, as opposed to the widespread we have now, and the ability for comment after comment and counter comment and things run away and you've got no control over it. For example, in this case here, I'd imagine that the person that has now had a slap on the hand could go back and post online about how they had the slap on the hand and it was unfair, and then generate many, many more disparaging comments from people that read that sort of thing. You don't dig terribly far. You can't control it, and it just we've got to the point, it seems, where anything goes. You can say whatever you want, and in most cases, you're going to get away with it. And from a commercial perspective, sometimes these things get a little bit unfair and you think, I've actually got no defense. And all you can do is just roll over and write the check out, swipe the card and say, there, go away. You've got your money. Literally, got your money.
And what makes it hard is the age-old saying, never believe a car salesman. So, you're up against it even from the start. So as soon as somebody makes a comment, they're more inclined to believe the comment maker than the person the comment's made about. So yeah, we do have an uphill battle in that sense.
Yeah.
Now I can say this, and I know there's members of the public that watch this show. So if you are watching right now and you're not on the trade, just close your ears for a second, please. You're not going to like what I'm going to say. But in my experience in the trade, since my first year was 1988 in the industry, that by far the biggest liars and tellers of blatant porkies I've ever encountered have been the public. Time after time after time, people will say whatever they think they can say. And no, most people are fantastic, but the number of porkies we get told, like just blatant untruths, is astonishing. And there's not one thing we can do about it because we're all just greasy old carnies.
The problem with that, Graham, is that one member of the public telling you a porky is not going to have particularly long-reaching ramifications. One rogue trader, as I probably would use the term, telling some porkies can hurt a lot of people very quickly. And
Absolutely.
we all know there are some characters in this trade. And I've long had my rage over the fact that there's certain characters in this industry that almost seem to be defended and treated as these protected rogues in the positive sense as opposed to the negative sense.
A jolly old rogue. He's a bit of a rogue, but I know what you mean. I'm not defending that for a minute. I'm not defending the rogue end of the trade, and yes, there is. I'm not saying that, but okay. So as a business like ours, and I've been involved in this for a very, very long time, and I'd say we're a stand-up business. We don't tolerate that sort of behaviour. Never had any white shoed, gold chained, ill-fitting suit-wearing salespeople. It's not our ilk. But we see, and it just seems to be that you can sell whatever you like to the car dealer because there's no ramifications, because it's not going to go anywhere, because it's not going to affect anything else but the transaction you're doing right here, right now. It's an observation we're talking about with truths. Boy, oh boy, walk a minute in my shoes.
Yep. Right, now on to the next story, because we are 34 minutes in already. And this one is such a weird one that I don't know what the guy was thinking. there's probably not a huge amount of discussion on this, but it is amusing and it did hit the headlines. And that was a car transporter involved in illegal crash scene shortcut. The truck driver faced the prospect of serious charges after driving through corners at the scene of a South Waikato crash that closed State Highway 1 on Wednesday morning. About 5:30 a.m., two vehicles collided at Piereri between Hora and Peperamu exits roads. 5 people were injured, 3 seriously, 2 critically, and the highway was closed for a scene examination by a serious crash unit. Police were still working at the scene at 9:30 a.m. when a car transporter and trailer drove around workers at 2 corners and then through the crash scene. An officer was forced to jump out of the way as the truck and trailer carried on through the investigation area, knocking over cones as it did so. Senior Sergeant Murray Hamilton says the driver was pulled over by police and spoken to, charges being considered against the 53-year-old Auckland man. Doesn't matter if you don't want to take a detour or you are running late, there's no excuse that justifies ignoring road closures or putting people at risk. No one needs their car that desperately. What the heck?
More to the point, somebody was either running quickly out of hours, as you can see the Reberton, it's nothing to do with the customer getting the car. Somebody was about to run out of hours and needed to get somewhere pretty damn quick for the turnover. That's on the way down to Taupo, and assuming the truck is on its way to Taupo for the driver turnover or handover, whatever, to head on the next leg south. Or I don't know how the transport company pay their guys. I don't know whether they're paid per delivery or they're penalised for being late. I don't know. I know that they are absolutely desperate for drivers out there in the transport sector. They have been. And I would observe as a consumer of those services that the calibre of some of them of the last year or two has not necessarily been the highest. And so
I would
I'm
imagine
not really surprised.
Unless there's a reasonable excuse, that's probably career over, I would have thought, for that person.
You would think so. And well, it should be. And I can't imagine that it wouldn't be under the circumstances we're talking about here. Not least because the company should be firing his ass because that job may be done by them, by the police.
If a police officer had to jump out of the way, that's a dangerous driving charge, surely.
Yeah, that's it. And I'd actually heartily condone them throwing the book at it. But we don't need that. We don't need that sort of crap.
I know it's a tenuous link to the industry, but just amusing that it was a car carrier. If it was like a medical supplies truck or a freezer truck that its chiller had broken down, I'd be like, but no one needs their Toyota Corolla that urgently. Stop
and ask first, yeah?
Yeah. Right. Did we discuss the update on IC cars over the break, Graham?
Which one? We had so many that were flying.
The one where he admitted he shouldn't have done what he'd done.
Oh, yeah, we did discuss that. But why? Is there more?
No, well, he's still doing the change of ownership on the PPSR, and we're digging further into that because that's not particularly
I thought
he
good. Stopped doing all that. I thought that was all like I shouldn't have done that, and I was not in the right headspace at the time.
He has, or at least the last time I spoke to those involved in the last week, he had not stopped. So, yeah.
The story that keeps on giving.
Oh, I love it. It's terrible, but I love it.
Oh, it makes for good news copy, right? I don't know. We talked about it so many times, and I don't know.
I'm done. I'm gonna move on. We'll touch on EVs and not so much for this story, but just talking about what's going on in the market. GD Wemora replaces Nissan Leaf as New Zealand's cheapest EV. The GD Wemora has become New Zealand's cheapest electric vehicle. The Andrew Sims Group offers it as at a retail price now of $26,990. Nissan Leaf was previously the market's most affordable EV at $29.90, but a Nissan spokesperson says the deal network has now cleared the remaining stock. Andrew Sims Group General Manager Jeremy Spice says no secret at the start of the 2024 there was a significant amount of unsold EV stock in New Zealand due to reduced demand following the removal of the rebate and the introduction of RUC. There have been some incredible offers that most brands have now sold through their EV stock. We've secured a final batch of GW Aura EVs and reduced the price to $26,990 plus on-road costs. This is the cheapest new EV on the market, and I highly doubt this price point will be replicated. This likely represents the bottom of the pricing curve for new EVs. Not only have we achieved price parity with petrol vehicles, don't need to debate that again, but you won't find a nice car with this spec for under $30,000. So the interesting comment there, and keeping in mind that Andrew Sims holds a number of the major EV selling brands and within its remit, it's got BYD, it's got Kia, it's got Aura, and some others there. Jeep, they have EVs as well. It sounds to me like, to all intents and purposes, the stocks are pretty much running out. We know that Ford's managed to knock through a lot of Mustangs in the last few months, a lot of Marquis, just to make Graham not tense up so much. The only thing I seem to see still lying around in any great volumes is there are a number of Polestar 2s and Volkswagen ID4 sitting in Mount Wellington, but even then, the number of those seems to have reduced. So do we think we're at the bottom of this pricing curve? I think we are. And will we now start to see the prices for EV stabilize and actually go back up again? David, any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I'll just clarify. We do have price parity for EVs when they heavily discount what they have with the Aura. So that's the only way they're achieving price parity at the moment. They'll be making a loss on those. But
yes.
they do need, so they do need to clear them. Yes, I do expect the prices to start going up. I do think that this is the bottom of the curve. I guess it goes to show the extent the market had to adjust to clear the stock when suddenly a discount disappears. And we don't have to look very far to see the same in overseas markets. When Simon Bridges started the original EV leadership group, I remember with sitting down with David Vinson and commenting to Minister Bridges, let's not repeat the mistakes that have been made in Europe. So if you look at the Netherlands, for example, they had EV subsidies, and when they changed the EV subsidies, they saw a 70 to 80% drop in the price of in the sales of EVs. And so then they had to bring some market interventions back up because the EU directives are stronger than in New Zealand. So it's no surprise, I guess. It's just what is the surprise is how long it's taken to clear the excess stock.
Which would be an indicator of just how little demand there actually has been for that product. And I don't want to sound like an EV naysayer here when I point that out, but it goes to show that we just perhaps didn't have as mature a market as we hoped we had when we took all the incentivization away. So when the tide went out, so to speak, when it comes to subsidies. And I do think that subsidies propel people to make decisions that weren't necessarily about the car, but about the subsidy. And as every good salesperson knows, a good discount on a lemon still makes it a good discount on a deal. It doesn't matter what the actual product itself is. And I think there was a lot of that going on, possibly more so than was recognized at the time. Because if the consumers of that volume had truly wanted to purchase an electric vehicle at that point, they wouldn't have cared whether there was a rebate or a discount or not. They would have made a conscious decision to purchase. It may have changed a little bit of the pricing structure, but not to that extent. Not when we look at the relative cost or the benefit of a discount at the time that was being offered. So the Aura situation, to me, it's secured the final batch. They just sort of, because there've been no Auras of any note selling. I've tracked the numbers through the last 3 or 4 months. There've been no Auras selling at all. They've been, in single runs. So there's obviously been talking about securing the final batch. Can I just translate the code for that? It means they just got to the back of the warehouse and thought, right, this shit's got to go. And they are absolutely correct in saying you cannot expect that stuff to arrive back in its number if you bought more in using David's supermarket analogy.
Can I just say, just to be clear and just to re-clarify what Graham is saying there, no one, including Graham, is implying that the Aura GWM Aura is either a lemon or shit. Let's just be clear.
No.
I know he used those words. Let's not take them out of context, okay?
Okay. No, I'm not.
He was using West Auckland language.
I was actually speaking about used car language in terms of a dud car being offered at a sale price. About consumers make decisions on interesting financial factors that we don't necessarily consider or see up front.
Here's the thing, Graham.
Yep.
I commented quite a lot in the early days of the discounts, particularly when the discount went up under Labor, that the price of an EV compared to its ICE equivalent, when you're looking at sort of the model for model, was still 3/4 again more than the ICE vehicle. But Kiwis love a discount and they feel like they're getting a bargain. So it's a wonderful study in marketing and consumer behavior, economics for environmental management per se. You
It's the
take
Briscoes
those.
factor. It's the Briscoes factor, isn't it? Exactly that.
But again, it's just I found it a fascinating exercise of the way in which it works, but it goes to illustrate that I think consumers are price conscious. So you take everything away and then you start adding other costs on, and then they say, okay, that's some starting to tip the other way again. And the discount was large enough that it tipped it in favour that says, I want an EV, I'm prepared to pay more, but if I don't have to pay ruck and I get a bit of a discount, I feel like I've got a deal. Now they're saying, oh, I've got to struggle a little bit. So as the price parity starts as price affordability starts to become more equivalent, consumers, I think, will start pricing back in the ability to pay a premium margin to get it. There are a lot of other things that go in. I think the battery range has to be more. I know people say that, average distance is only so, but Kiwis don't buy for average distance. They buy for holidays or they buy for other things. So you do need a decent range, and you do need a lot of EV chargers. All of that starting to get in place. So I think 2025, we will start to see some of that readdressing, sort of the balance starting to change again. And coming back to that point that Amy made in the December stats press release, even though consumer demand is not where the regulatory is, if the price starts to go up again because the importers of new and used vehicles have to put the cost of the CO2 that isn't being met because they're over the target onto the vehicles, then that works against EV sales because, again, it puts the price up. And it'll be interesting to see whether the distributors and importers even it out across all vehicles or whether they load it on some to protect the higher selling volume of others.
I think that there was demand for EVs there in the market. I don't think it necessarily drastically increased the number of people at the time willing to own or drive an electric vehicle. But I think what it did was force those people's hands and they jumped into the market. So what we saw is the market go from, 2-3% of the market to, I think we peaked out 1 month at about 27, 28, 29% of the market. And then this year we've been back down around 5 or 6% of the market, the number off the top of my head. So what you've done is taken that 20% in the middle and split it out over 2 years, essentially. And now we're coming into the third year. It's going to be interesting to see if over time that group willing to buy one has grown, and whether we'll see those numbers go back up. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting year to watch this year. In regards to the Clean Car Standard, I don't think the end of discounts is entirely here, though we're not going to see these big cut price jobbies anymore. But I certainly think there will be brands where it is beneficial from a commercial perspective to enhance or assist their EV sales a little bit, just to balance out the numbers. If you take, for example, Ford, for every 60 kilowatt or the entry level Marquee they sell, that's enough credits to, I think, to offset about 8 Ford Ranger bi-turbos or something. Oh, no, Ford Ranger V6s. Yeah. So if you consider that those that the discount the standard penalty on that might be $3,000 or $4,000, well, that's essentially I know this isn't exactly how the math works, but that's $20-something thousand that theoretically you could slap on the ticket of a Marquee. Well, they won't. What they'll do is they'll sell that at maybe a $10,000 discount, and then that's $10,000 less. More you can spread across those ranges. So I don't think the days of entirely cut price or enhanced price EVs is gone, but it's going to be different. Now, the argument goes is that in part that's how the clean car standard is supposed to work, isn't it? You know, part of it is encouraging people to buy these cars because they're going to be cheaper, and the function for that is that they cost more to own those cars.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, Richard, is if you look at what GM have done with the introduction of their luxury brand, is they've priced it at a really reasonable price to start off with. So that's the other option, is not to load the pricing point, and to think carefully. Okay, so we're a luxury market; people are expecting to pay in excess of $100,000, but let's market it around 120 to 130 as opposed to 140 to 150, and then they position it in the market compared to their competitors. So that's the behaviour. Either they have some discounting, as in the case of Ford, to offset the others, and Ford's not the only one. I think Toyota will be looking carefully at their mix. Or if you're primarily EV, pricing your introductory price point really competitively. And that is exactly one of the design criteria of a CO standard. That's what it's meant to achieve.
One of the issues, though, is what is the price of a particular EV model? So, one of my favourites from the last couple of years has been the Marquis GT. I really like it. I think it's a really good car, and for that matter, for the record, there's a BYD Seal Performance. I liked that too. So let's just say I'm a Mustang Mach-E GT buyer, okay, which is quite feasible. There are some astonishingly good deals out now. So if you look online and see that the supposed demo models that are being sold, correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, I think is $69,000, is it, I think, for a Mach-E GT? Okay.
And to me, that's a car that should be capable of carrying a $100,000 price tag.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's an example. It's a $70,000 Mach-E GT, effectively brand new. Now, the problem is this. First of all, the argument says, well, I just bought one last year or 18 months ago and it was $120,000. So my devaluation curve of that particular vehicle has now put me off ever buying anything like that ever again, because I've lost so much money in my first year and a half of ownership. Or the alternative says, can Ford continue to bring in Mach-E GTs and sell them at $69,000? If they can do that, and they've got the spec that we're used to, then they're actually maybe of some benefit. But the consumer
you're going to see them coming in at $69,000, but I certainly think with the standard, you will see that some of these cars that may have been more expensive will be reduced in price a little bit as they start to need those credits. It's not going to be cost effective just to simply buy credits. It's going to become more cost effective to discount electric vehicles or lower CO2 vehicles to balance out those credits. What I was going to say is I actually don't think the next year the focus is going to be on EVs. I'd say for the next year to 18 months, we are going to see a real shift towards long-range plug-in hybrid vehicles, and that will be the platform that really does start to fit within the clean car standard scheme. Over the next little bit, we're going to see more coming out of Europe. We're going to see a lot coming out of China. All the Chinese brands are going to have long-range range extender / long-range plug-in hybrid vehicles. They suit New Zealand conditions. They suit the way New Zealanders think they want to use vehicles. They don't think they want to use vehicles because... Anyway, let's not get into that debate again. And they
I was going to say, Richard,
affordable.
The point I was trying to make was the thing I wanted for 25 and perhaps into 26. Consumers need price stabilization. So the point I was making about the variances, it doesn't really matter at which end of the scale we talk about. The consumer needs to see stabilized pricing, because right now it's difficult to judge what a vehicle's worth. If you're looking at a new EV, what is it actually worth? And so I'd like to see, it doesn't matter if they go up in price, but we need to see a stabilized market in terms of longer term pricing. So a consumer making a purchase, or for that matter, a lease company, has some degree of surety as to what the product is actually worth. And when we can establish that, we may see some more maturity creep back into the EV market, because consumers, whether they're corporate or they're private consumers, have some degree of security over the value of the product.
And I think we will, provided the government doesn't mess with the system too much again.
Yeah, I was going to say, Graham, this is like a bad hangover. This is still the hangover of the major changes to regulatory requirements under the CO2 standard.
Correct.
So, Richard, when I talk about EVs, I talk about pure and plug-in hybrid. So I differentiate when I'm talking about pure by saying pure, but EVs to me are the plug-in hybrid and pure EVs. Hybrid, I know Toyota uses a term electric vehicles, but they're not. They are an electrification.
They are not.
And so we're seeing, I think you're right, Richard. I think we will see the shift from hybrid to plug-in hybrid and long range. And where it will be most useful is in the light commercials. That is, I think, where we will see some market gains.
Well, you look at the major car. Well, the first two major car of the years released in Australia and New Zealand. One, BYD Sea Lion 6 long range plug-in hybrid. Two in Australia, the news.com.au one of the bigger ones there. BYD Shark.
Yeah. So we will see that, and I think 2025 will start to lose that hangover from the CCS changes. That's what I'm hoping.
Yep.
And the market, I think, will start to mature, and I think we will see some significant changes around behaviour with the introduction of new models coming in. 26 and 27, I think we're always going to be the time when there would be a major shift for new vehicles of what was coming out the pipeline. The only thing that I think tempers my belief in that is that Europe has started to backpedal a little bit. But what happens in Europe, New Zealand tends to follow 6 or 7 years later. So we will start to see some really significant changes in China. China is the country that is forcing some of this change because they're wanting to become an export market. So when you've got 1.1 billion, or is it 1.2 billion people, you don't have to worry about exporting. You've got a domestic market. But when that domestic market matures, which it has, they've used Australia and New Zealand in the last 5 years as a testing ground for the homologation capability to export. Well, they've done that. They've ironed out some of the wrinkles. They've got a few more to go, but I've ironed out most of the wrinkles. I think in the next 2 years, models coming out of China will increasingly dominate the New Zealand market and will change the landscape.
Yep. Yeah. One of the things around the clean car standards, there's still, I think, some niggling there in comments made and things like the release out from the IA at the start of this year, that it's almost like this plan. Come on, we need these targets lifted a little more, and I almost don't think we're at a point where that's necessarily that beneficial, because at least at the moment, as well, they're probably not ideal from some brands' perspectives, and I know there's some bigger talk around weight, that kind of thing. We kind of just need to get in the thing where it just stays the same and we can plan now. I think it's probably more as much the case as anything else.
Regulatory certainty is one of the requirements for stabilising the market. That's the point you've been making, Graham.
Yep. Right, on to our last couple of stories before we finish up for today. Delaney announces departure from Ford New Zealand. Ford New Zealand Sales Director Jerry Delaney has announced that after more than 13 years with the Blue Oval, he will leave the company in February to embark on a new career chapter. Delaney says it was hard to farewell the sales team that he's led for the last 10 years and the broader team at Ford New Zealand. My time with Ford has been filled with memorable experiences, valuable lessons, and most importantly, wonderful colleagues, dealer network, and business partners, Delaney says. I am genuinely grateful for the support, camaraderie, and friendships I have developed. We have a story coming out in AutoTalk next week in the magazine. He is off to Inchcape, which is, I would imagine, quite an interesting project at the moment, considering they've got some Chinese brands in there and Korean brands. Father of the Monaro to retire from General Motors. That is a magnificent beard. I have seen that beard on a video call, talking to me live. It is an impressive beard. He does it every winter. Former GM Holden chief designer Michael Simcoe, who led the creation of the VT and VE Commodore and the 2001 Monaro Coupe, will step down from his role as GM Global Design Vice President on July 1, 2025. Simcoe will retire from after a 42-year career with the company.
Wow.
He joined GM in Holden in 1983 and began his current role in 2016 following the retirement of Edward Walburn. Currently the Executive Director of Global Cadillac Design, Brian Nesbitt will succeed Jim Simcoe. Nesbitt will become the 8th Chief of GM Global Design on July 1. He'll remain in his current handover until then. You can read the full story of it at AutoTalk Australia. I have met Mike a couple of times back from, I guess you'd say, some very younger days. In the early 2000s, I did a few visits over to the GM Design Centre when they were launching various models. Slightly concerning with my realizing my age when people who I thought was young, who were pretty young for their job when I started, and now retiring and knocking on 70. So,
not looking at you, David.
But that man has had his hand or led the people who designed some pretty iconic vehicles.
What a cool career. What a cool career to retire on.
Yes.
Mm.
He's definitely a bit more anonymous without the beard, but apparently that's going when he gets back to Australia. It was more of a Michigan winter thing, which I can imagine. It's a bit chilly up there. Yeah. Going back to Melbourne, he's certainly going to probably not miss the weather.
Not miss Ann Arbor.
Yeah. Tesla closing in on Twitter as world's most searched car brand. Tesla is rapidly gaining ground on Twitter, according to the latest most searched cars report from Compare the Market Australia. The report, using data from global trends across 155 countries, shows that Tesla continues to narrow the gap, with Toyota retaining its top spot as the most searched car brand in 64 countries, including New Zealand, a drop from 69 just 2 years ago. Meanwhile, Tesla's presence has grown significantly. The American electric vehicle giant climbed from being the most searched brand in 29 countries last year to 34. If this trend continues, Tesla could surpass Twitter as the world's most searched car brand by 2031. Chinese automaker BYD made its debut in the rankings, driven by the global success of its top-selling electric and hybrid vehicles. The brand claimed the number one spot in 2 countries, Uzbekistan and Nepal, marking a significant milestone for the emerging EV manufacturer. Interesting with the Chinese stuff. Talking about New Zealand, Australia as test beds, they are massive through the stands in all those parts of the world. I've been to a number of international events lately, and a lot of people from those parts of the world there. What does this mean to you in your little 20-car yard in the back blocks of Oamaru? Go onto your website now and start putting into little corners of your website and your descriptions Twitter and Tesla. Try and put Twitter and Tesla as many places you can on your website and in your Trade Me listings.
A wag would suggest, Richard, that the last couple of months for Tesla has been increased by people in darkened rooms with hoods going, Elon Musk, Illuminati, Tesla, Donald Trump, end of the world. Didn't do the brand any harm when it came to a most searched term.
Yes.
Any publicity is good publicity, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The whole Elon is, Elon thing, people going blah blah blah. If you're really into certain other brands, go back and look at the views of their owners in like the 1930s.
But nobody cares about that. We just had a conversation 15 minutes ago about history is bunk and the old days of now we're in the social media era. Who cares about the stuff that happened 100 years ago? We want now.
Yeah. Anyway, I think you understand my point.
I do.
Australia's new vehicle sales up 0.03 in 2024. That's a scary number for these Australians.
Was it a short news week?
Yeah. Australia's new vehicle sales increased by 0.03% in 2024 to 1,220,607 units for the calendar year. The effects showed that 95,895 new vehicle sales were sold in December 2024, 2.7% less than the same period in 2023. Toyota was the market leader, followed by Ford, Mazda, Kia, and Mitsubishi. Toyota RAV4 was the top-selling vehicle, followed by the Ford Ranger, Toyota Hilux, Toyota Prado, and Ford Everest. For the calendar year, Toyota was the best-selling brand with 241,296 sales. So, in other words, Toyota alone in Australia does 2.5 times our market. It's a big thing.
Could that be
But
something to do with the population differences there?
Yeah, 5 to 6 times more population.
yes, but the interesting element with that is that it's only 0.3% up. And I have been, again, on some events with Australians lately, and they're looking at New Zealand going, we're kind of expecting to be where you are next year. And that they see themselves as about to slide into a bit of a recession as well. So they're feeling a little wee bit nervous over there at the moment. So while they're getting out, we're hopefully going out. So
Won't be
yes,
nearly as severe there, not nearly as severe, for a whole lot of reasons that this show is not going to go into. But I don't think any reduction, if you like, in the economic activity is going to be anywhere near the same as we've had here.
yes.
Although our markets have been a little bit out of sync for the last 6 or 7 years. Before that, they used to go up and down together, but now they're sort of out of cycle. And I don't quite really understand why. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know, Graham. I think the Australian economy, is a feeling there is that it needs a reset. And I don't know where that reset conversation's coming from. So I'm going to watch the Australian market with interest. But you're right, in the New Zealand economy, as we've discussed, has been a forced and managed recession by the Reserve Bank.
When the lollipop man is earning as much as a New Zealand doctor, you start to wonder if it's slightly overheated. I think the interesting thing from the dealer side, or the market side there, is that it's long been the case, if you look back through the Deloitte industry, the benchmarks, dealer margins are thinner in Australia. In fact, for a long time, that's not the case anymore. A long time, they were selling cars underwater and making their money back in other areas. So wonder if a smaller dip in sales than we see here will still hurt just as much, if not a little more, when it comes to the actual dealer market, is potentially the concern. Now, last one. They've updated the Honda Civic, going to a one-model Honda Civic Sport 5-door hatchback solely with a hybrid powertrain. But here's the interesting thing, and tell me if I'm finding this a little bit crazy. It's $59,000 for a Honda Civic. And I'm wondering if this is just a bit of a sign that, because New Zealand car prices have actually been, I think, in a lot of ways cheaper than Australia over the last few years. And I wonder if we've had a bit of a suppressed market or whatever, and our prices have been a bit lower than they potentially should have. And this is a sign that we might see prices correct a little bit upwards across the board. Because that is rather costly. I ran the numbers for
very expensive 5-door hatchback with no.
It's something like $13,000 more than the most expensive Corolla. I know you got the Twitter, but they're both on a price promise basis. They're both fixed pricing. It's about $6,000 more than the most expensive Mazda 3. Now, it's a bigger vehicle, quite a substantially bigger vehicle, getting up close to old Accord sizes, and it is very highly spec. But I think this is a little bit of a canary in the gold mine, that we've had some rather cheap car prices for quite some time, and that we might start seeing them going up.
How much is the new CRV? I can probably answer that question, because we, through mechanisms not best gone into the show, we have a pretty good understanding of Honda pricing. Every week the email comes through. That's a new Honda CRV sitting right there. In fact, it's a new Honda CRV and change sitting right there.
It's actually more. So
it's changed. Yeah.
If you want to get a hybrid, top spec hybrid CRV, it's $67,000. But you can have an all-wheel drive turbocharged petrol CRV for $53,000. You can have a sport 7-seater for $57,000. You have the premium for all-wheel drive for $55,000. So it's interesting.
It's almost as big as the Cord. Yeah, Graham's got to go. Almost.
I've got to
as good
go,
as the
sorry
Accord.
guys. I've got the
With the Cord
rarity
pricing.
in the dealership world. We've got people here that have been assigned to come and see me that I've made an appointment for, and they're a little bit early, and I need to go and speak to them. That's what a good dealer does.
I think we'll wrap it up there. I think it's interesting to see what's going with Pro. We'll maybe talk about the next one next time and come up with some different things. But thanks everyone for joining us. We will be back
Happy New
next
Year.
week, I believe. Happy New Year. And we'll big year ahead on the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap.